You've probably heard the term fundamental rights 1,000 times, but have you ever stopped to ask what actually makes them so fundamental? Why are these specific rights put on a pedestal? Well, the answer takes us on a journey back through centuries of struggle. Let's dive right in. So, why that word fundamental? It's not just some fancy legal term. The truth is that name was earned. It comes from a long global fight for freedom, a fight to make sure that no one, not even the most powerful king or government, could take away your most basic human liberties. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the historical fight for these rights. Then we'll see how India's constitution made a great promise to its people. We'll zoom in on two of the biggest pillars, the right to be equal and the freedoms you inherited. And finally, we'll tackle the tricky but crucial balancing act of rights that have reasonable limits. Okay, first things first, we need to get one thing straight. Rights are never just handed to you on a silver platter. They are always, always won. And this isn't some new idea. It's a battle that's been raging for centuries, from the fields of ancient England to the streets of Paris during the Revolution and right into the heart of India's own freedom movement. You know, this idea that a ruler's power has to have limits, it didn't just appear out of thin air. Just look at this timeline. It goes all the way back to 1215 in England, when a bunch of angry lords literally forced their king to sign the Magna Carta because he was acting like the law didn't apply to him. That same spark caught fire centuries later in the French Revolution, and it was a core demand right here in India with the Nehru Report in 1928, way before we were even independent. And all of that history leads us right here to India's great promise to its people, Part 3 of our Constitution. This is the modern solution to that ancient problem of a ruler with too much power. It's basically the official rulebook designed to protect every single citizen from the government itself. And this really gets to the core of why they're called fundamental. The framers of our Constitution saw them as the absolute essential ingredients for a person to grow and live with dignity. You can think of them as a firewall, built to stop any government from ever sliding into tyranny. Here's a really simple way to think about it. Imagine the state, the government, is the all-powerful big brother, and you, the citizen, you're the little brother. Well, the fundamental rights are the official rules of the house, making sure the big brother can't just make things up as he goes, take all the toys, and bully the little brother. It keeps the game fair. That's a fantastic question, actually. If these rights are meant to protect us from the state, who or what are we really talking about here? Is it just the Prime Minister's office? Is it just the government in Delhi? The answer is not even close. The definition of the state is incredibly wide. It's not just parliament or the central government. It's your state government, your local city corporation, the panchayat in your village, government agencies like the airport authority. It can even include a private company if it's doing work on behalf of the government. The bottom line is, if an organization is using state power, your fundamental rights are your shield against it. All right, let's get into the rights themselves, starting with what might just be the most important one of all, the right to equality. This is the bedrock principle of any fair society, the idea that no matter who you are, in the eyes of the law, you're the same as everyone else. What's really interesting here is that this right actually has two parts. The first one, equality before law, is an idea we borrowed from the UK. It's simple. Nobody's above the law. Not a politician, not a CEO, nobody gets a free pass. Then there's the second part, equal protection of laws, which comes from the US. This means the law has to treat people in similar situations in the same way. It can't have one rule for one person and a different rule for their neighbor if their circumstances are the same. Okay, that's the legal theory, but what does this actually mean for you, when you're just out and about living your life? How does it make a real difference? Well, this is where it gets incredibly practical. It means a shopkeeper cannot refuse to sell you something. A hotel can't deny you a room. You can't be stopped from entering a public park or using a public well simply because of your religion, your race, your caste, your sex, or where you were born. It is a powerful and direct check on discrimination in public life. Okay, moving on. Now we get to what I like to call the engine room of our democracy, the fundamental freedoms. These 6 freedoms, all packed under Article 19, are the personal liberties that allow a society to breathe, to argue, to create, and to grow. These are the freedoms you were born with as a citizen of India. The freedom to say what you think, to express your ideas without being afraid, the freedom to gather with other people for a peaceful protest, the freedom to join a union or form a group, and the freedom to travel, live, and work anywhere you want within the borders of this country. And let's be very clear, without these freedoms, the word democracy is pretty much meaningless. These are the tools that allow you to hold your government accountable. They're what gives you the right to start a blog, to criticize a policy you disagree with, or to organize a rally to demand change. But, and this is a really important but, as powerful as these rights are, they are not a blank check to do whatever you want. The Constitution is smart. It sets up a very delicate balancing act because individual rights can't exist in a total vacuum. This brings up a common question. Does freedom of speech mean you can say absolutely anything you want, whenever you want, with zero consequences? Is that how it works? The answer is a very clear no. Your rights are not absolute. For instance, your freedom to speak ends where it starts inciting violence. Your freedom to protest ends if it creates chaos and threatens public safety. The government is allowed to put reasonable restrictions on your rights for big-picture reasons, like protecting national security, maintaining public order, or even on grounds of morality. So who decides what's reasonable? I mean, that's the key word, right? Who stops the government from just calling everything a reasonable restriction to shut people up? That's where the courts come in. The Supreme Court is the final referee, the ultimate guardian, whose job is to protect your rights from being unfairly taken away. And this is maybe the most powerful feature of all. If the government passes a law that you believe violates your fundamental rights, you don't have to go through a dozen lower courts. You have the right to go straight to the Supreme Court. And if the court agrees with you, it has the power to strike that law down, to just wipe it off the books. So, from the Magna Carta to the courtrooms of today, the story has been the same. These rights were not gifts. They were fought for. They aren't just dry words in a textbook. They are a shield passed down to every single citizen. So the final question really is, knowing that you hold this shield,